Bikurim Shalom. Before finishing this study, I held to a Wednesday, April 5th, 30 AD crucifixion, with Yeshua's burial that evening and his resurrection directly after sunset on the Sabbath. Counting backwards 13 days places us at March 23rd, being the first day of the month, and since according to astral pixels, the conjunction was at 1747 UTC on March 22nd, which will be 7:47 p.m. in Jerusalem, it supported my belief that the conjunction was the indicator of the new month. He would have been in the grave on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 3 days, and Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night, 3 nights, which perfectly aligned with my belief that the sign of Jonah was Yeshua being in the grave for 3 full days and 3 full nights. In my view, he rose just after the Sabbath, probably passed the night spending some much anticipated quality time with his father, and was long gone when the women got to the tomb before sunrise on Sunday, so everything synced, except one important detail didn't fit. But I figured I will be able to reconcile it later. Let me show you why I was wrong. In John 2, Yeshua says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The word 3 being the cardinal number thrice. Mark 9 says the Son of Man will be killed, and in 3 days he will rise again. But Matthew 16 and Luke 9 have him rising on the 3rd day, with the Greek being the ordinal number tritos. So the first thing to determine is whether Passover is included in the count. Let's start with Peter's trip to Cornelius. On day 1, Cornelius is praying at the 9th hour when the angel appears and tells him to send for Peter. On day 2, Peter has his vision at the 6th hour while praying before the 3 men show up. On day 3, Peter and other brothers from Joppa went away with them. Then on day 4, they get to Cornelius in Caesarea, and Cornelius tells them he was fasting 4 days ago when everything happened. So in this account, day 4 is the 4th day. So the first day is included. In 1 Samuel 20, tomorrow is the new moon. And today, David devises a plan with Jonathan to hide until the 3rd day at even to see if Saul gets mad. And Jonathan agrees to sound his father tomorrow and the 3rd day. On tomorrow, which is the first day of the month, David is missing and Saul is silent. On the 3rd day, which is the 2nd day of the month, David is missing again and Saul flips. And on the morning of the 4th day, they meet and Jonathan releases David. In Exodus 19, God tells Israel to sanctify themselves today and tomorrow and be ready against the 3rd day. And in Luke 13, Yeshua says, "Behold, I cast out devils and I do cures today and tomorrow, and the 3rd day I shall be perfected." I could keep going, but I think this is sufficient to establish that the first day is included, and that settles the count for the 3rd day. Now, let's look at 3 days. In 2 Chronicles 10, Israel goes to Rehoboam to request that he ease the grievous servitude they were under, and he tells them to come again in 3 days. Then in verse 12, it says that they came back to Rehoboam the 3rd day, because he has said to them, "Come again to me on the 3rd day." So within 3 days, after 3 days, and the 3rd day all mean the same thing. So now let's get to the heart of the matter, which is the Passover itself. The Passover is a Thanksgiving offering, so it is eaten the first day only, meaning the same day it is offered, and the remainder must be burnt before morning. This pertains to Yeshua's death and burial. Then we have the vow or voluntary component. This offering is eaten the 1st and 2nd day, and if anything remains, it is burnt the 3rd day. If it is eaten at all the 3rd day, it is an abomination and will not be accepted. This pertains to Yeshua's resurrection. So Yeshua can be in the grave no part of the 3rd day, meaning either the 3 days and 3 nights in the grave is not the sign of Jonah, or Yeshua is not the Passover. So now that we have the precepts, let's go to the accounts of the Last Supper. I want to start with Mark because most scholars believe Matthew and Luke's accounts were derived from Mark, since his is the least elaborate. Verse 2 says the chief priests and scribes did not want to crucify Yeshua on the feast day, lest there be an uproar of the people. And verse 12 says that on the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, the disciples went to prepare the Passover. The Greek here says prote azimon. Prote is ordinal, meaning first, and it is pretty much always translated this way except John 1, where John the Baptist says Yeshua was before him. Some conclude from this language that the entire feast was being called the Passover, and the Passover was being counted as the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But I am not convinced of this. Passover is not the first day of Hag Matzot. It is its own separate feast. However, the 14th day is the first day without leaven. Deuteronomy 16 says no unleavened bread should be seen in all the coast of Israel for 7 days. Exodus 13 says 7 days unleavened bread should be eaten. The 7th day is a feast, and no leaven should be seen in all of their quarters. Exodus 12 says 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, from the 14th at even till the 21st at even. If you include the 14th day, you have a total of 8 days. This is why the command says 14th day at even. Once the sun sets, the day is over and the night is approaching. The Passover was to be eaten at night before God passed over Egypt, and commemorated at night afterwards. However, the Passover cannot be offered with leaven, so all leaven must be removed from your house during the day before it is killed between the evenings. Thus, the 14th day is the first day of unleavened bread, not due to eating unleavened bread, but due to the removal of it from your house. So the accurate rendering of the days is the 14th day being the preparation day and the first of unleavened bread, with sacrifices beginning at 3 p.m. The 14th day at sunset beginning the Passover Seder, and the following sunrise, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the 15th day and a holy day, and thus the day that the chief priest wanted to avoid. Then we see that at the feast, one prisoner is released, and we are later told it was the preparation, the day before the Sabbath, when they bought linens. The preparation can refer to either the 14th day, as we saw, or Friday, which is when you must bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil in preparation for the Sabbath, since the weekly Sabbath is a Shabbat Shabbaton, where no work at all is allowed. While the 1st and 7th days of Matzot are holy days, in which no servile work is to be done, they normally allow for food preparation. Therefore, they are not Sabbaths. So the use of Sabbath here, and especially pro-Sabbaton, points to the weekly Sabbath. In chapter 16, it says when the Sabbath was passed, they bought spices to anoint him. This means they must have been purchased at night, and very early, Miaton Sabbaton, after sunrise, he was gone. Mia is cardinal, meaning one, and it is also feminine singular, while Sabbaton is neuter plural. So the feminine word day is rightly inserted here. So this should be translated either one day of the Sabbaths or one day of the weeks. Since we already saw that the women bought spices after the Sabbath, the context suggests one day of the weeks. The weeks being referred to are the 7 full weeks that precede Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, better known as Pentecost. To properly count Pentecost, you must count 50 days and 7 full weeks from first fruits, which is day 1 of those weeks. Then it says, having risen early, prote Sabbatou, he appeared to Mary Magdalene. Since prote is feminine and Sabbatou is neuter, the word prote is again pointing to the word day to properly translate this first day of the week. So Miaton Sabbaton and prote Sabbatou refer to the same day. And while prote Sabbatou seems to just mean Sunday, Mian Sabbaton or Miaton Sabbaton seems to refer to the days or possibly just the Sundays within the count of Shavuot, as Acts 20 also uses this phrase to refer to a day within that count. So for days of the week, Mark has Yeshua being crucified on Friday, the women buying spices Saturday night, and Yeshua being risen before they got to the grave after sunrise on Sunday. However, he also has Yeshua sending his disciples to make ready the Passover on the day it is killed, which is the 14th day per scripture, and they keep it that night. Then Yeshua is crucified on the next day, the first day of the Feast of Matzot, which the chief priest wanted to avoid. Next, let's go to Matthew 26. Verse 5 says, not in the feast, lest there be an uproar. The same as Mark. 17 says, the first day of Matzot, I will keep the Passover with my disciples. Again, prote azimon. Chapter 27, verse 15 says, at the feast, one prisoner is released. Then in verse 62, it says, the next day following the preparation, they sent guards to the tomb till the 3rd day, because he said, within 3 days I will rise. In Matthew 28, it says, after the Sabbaths, the word after being opse, which means long after, and the word Sabbath appears to be plural. But I believe it is actually just pointing to the weekly Shabbat Shabbaton. It says dawning toward Min Sabbaton, one of the week. So for days of the week, Matthew has Yeshua being crucified on Friday, the chief priest securing the tomb on Shabbat, and Yeshua being risen before they got to the grave on Sunday. And while his dates are a bit more ambiguous than Mark's, he still points to Yeshua sending his disciples to make ready the Passover on the 14th day, and Yeshua being crucified on the 15th, the first day of Matzot, which the chief priests are again noted as wanting to avoid. Next, let's look at Luke 22. Verse 1 says, the feast of Matzot, called the Passover. I still take this to be speaking about the Passover only, and not the entire feast, although this is a little less clear. Verse 7 says the day of Matzot, when the Passover is killed, they prepare to eat the Passover. Chapter 23 verse 17 says, for of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. Then verse 54 says that day was the preparation, and the Passover and the Sabbath drew on. 56 says the women from Galilee turned and prepared spices and oils before the Sabbath and rested the Sabbath. This can be easily reconciled to Mark 15, which says there were many women that came from Galilee, and that only Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James and Joseph, and Salome bought spices after the Sabbath. Luke 24 says Meaton Sabbaton, very early in the morning, or deep dawn, meaning still dark with the first hint of light. So for days of the week, Luke has Yeshua being crucified on Friday, some women preparing spices before the Sabbath, and Yeshua being risen before they got to the grave on Sunday. Like Mark, he also has Yeshua sending his disciples to make ready the Passover on the day it is killed, which is the 14th day, and the crucifixion on the 15th day, the first day of Hag Matzot. So all three of the Synoptic Gospels agree that Yeshua was crucified on the preparation, that a Sabbath day followed that preparation, and that he was already gone when the women got to the tomb at or shortly after dawn on first fruits, suggesting he was risen before or on the third day. This points to a Friday crucifixion and resurrection before Sunday, the third day, consistent with Scripture. However, they also seem to claim the Passover was prepared on the 14th day, and Yeshua was crucified on the 15th day. Interestingly, though, none of them mention an animal being eaten, and they all record Yeshua dying precisely at the 9th hour, which is insignificant if he didn't die on the 14th, because the Passover was to be killed between the evenings on the 14th, which begins at the 9th hour. I have seen different theories to explain the Last Supper, like it being the fast of the firstborn to show that only the firstborn were in danger in Egypt. But this meal took place the night before the Passover, so it doesn't address the problem of Mark and Luke saying the Passover was to be killed on the day before the Last Supper took place. The new day beginning at night theory doesn't work either, because he sent them before evening to make preparations, which by all accounts is a different day from the crucifixion. Granted, there could be a gap in my understanding concerning customs, like maybe they were erroneously killing the Passover on the 13th, which is not what God said to do. And that could reconcile these accounts, but I cannot prove this from what is written in those accounts. Or maybe there is something else altogether that I am missing. But as it stands, I cannot reconcile these accounts to Scripture. So to me, they appear to be discrepant. Then we have John's account. John 13, verse 1, before the feast of the Passover was the Last Supper, and John shifts the focus away from the meal to a different event. Chapter 18, verse 28, the high priest didn't want to be defiled so that they could eat the Passover. Verse 39, it was the custom to release one at the Passover. Chapter 19, verse 31, it was the preparation, and the coming Sabbath was a high day. So that preparation was a triple preparation, since the Sabbath was a high day, being the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and they also had to prepare the Passover. Then in verse 42, they laid Yeshua in a new sepulchre because of the Jews' preparation day, because the sepulchre was nigh at hand. Chapter 20, one of the weeks while it was dark, they came to the tomb. This eliminates the possibility that Yeshua was in the grave any part of the third day, which would be Sunday after sunrise. He rose before dawn at the latest, after resting the Sabbath, according to the commandment. Verse 19, he appeared to the disciples the same day, one of the weeks. So John is clear that Yeshua was crucified on Friday the 14th and was already risen and gone before Sunday the 16th. And he is fully synchronized to Scripture. This is one of several reasons I am admittedly heavily biased towards John's writings. Despite the discrepancies between John and the others about Yeshua being crucified on Passover, all agree he was raised by the third day, which means he was in the grave for 36 hours tops and dead for less than 48. So the sequence of events is the Last Supper on Thursday night before Yeshua is taken, the trial and crucifixion on Friday, Yeshua's death promptly at 3 p.m. when the Passover was slain, his burial after even was come, meaning the sun had already set, but it was not completely dark. The first day of Hag Matzot on Shabbat, and Yeshua rising sometime before the women arrived at the empty tomb, before sunrise on Sunday. This is consistent with Yeshua being offered the first day and deemed acceptable the third day. So now that we have all the facts, I have to date the Passover 2 days later to Friday, April 7th. I can do this by either assuming that the moon conjunction calculations are off and that the conjunction was actually on March 24th, which I feel would be dishonest, or I can take March 25th as the first of the month and admit that the first day of the month is determined by the first sighting of the moon and not by the conjunction as I previously asserted. I choose to admit I was wrong. And because I did not properly sync just one detail of the resurrection, it trickled down into my understanding of the calendar for the feast days and blocked my understanding of the sign of Jonah and the sign of the Son of Man. But now, with that light shining in, I can see that the literal 2 days and 2 nights of Yeshua's death and burial corresponds to the spiritual 2 days and 2 nights of the sign of Jonah. And the literal 3 days and 3 nights of Jonah correspond to the spiritual 3 days and 3 nights of the sign of the Son of Man, such that the entire equation is balanced. Fortunately, the dating of the feast days is something that will easily be resolved when Yeshua comes, and we can actually keep them as required. I don't think anyone who honors the feast will argue with Yeshua about the dates. But just imagine the trickle-down effect of deep-rooted doctrinal errors that are not so easily let go of, and the havoc it is wreaking in the lives of those who are in them. I believe such refusal to let go to be part of the reason some of Israel are purged out in the wilderness. Just something to think about. So this study has proven me wrong and made me change some of my positions. And I'm okay with that, because in my search for truth, I have to go wherever the scriptural evidence leads. And this study has brought me a lot of revelation. Pun intended on that, by the way, because I have a whole nother series coming on revelation that came out of these studies where I was proven wrong yet again. So praise Yah for correction, and stay tuned for that one in the fall. Thank you for joining me. Feel free to drop any comments, concerns, agreements, or disagreements in the comment section below. I hope that this study has blessed you and inspired you to search further into Yah's word. May Yahuwah bless you and keep you. May Yahuwah shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.